Can you imagine an HOA member aggressively trying to force a black woman out of a private pool, threatening to call security and demanding she leave immediately, only to discover in the most shocking way possible that she actually owns the entire property, including their apartment? Where are you watching from? Comment below before we dive into today's story. And subscribe to this channel, it's free. The sun blazed down on Phoenix Gardens apartments like a furnace. It was the kind of heat that made people hide behind air conditioners. But not Robert Mitchell. At 55, the silver-haired HOA board member took his job seriously. Rules were everything. Order mattered. And today, something felt wrong. He stepped out of Building C, marching toward the pool. That's when he saw her. A tall black woman sat calmly at a poolside table. She was reading what looked like a business journal, sipping water from a metal bottle. Quiet. But Robert didn't recognize her. And that was enough. "Excuse me," he called out, walking fast toward her. "Which apartment are you visiting?" The woman looked up, surprised but not scared. She closed her book slowly and placed her hands on the table. "I'm not visiting anyone," she said steadily. Robert's face grew red. "This pool is for residents only. Guests must be with someone who lives here. It's in the rules." "I know the rules," she replied calmly. "I'm not a guest." "Then who are you?" Robert demanded. She paused, deciding whether to answer. "I'm just spending time here," she said finally. "Right." Robert crossed his arms. "Well, I need your apartment number. If you can't give it to me, I'm calling security. We've had problems with people sneaking in before." The woman looked past him for a moment, like she was deciding if this fight was worth it. A small breeze moved through the palm trees nearby. "I don't live in any one apartment," she said quietly. "But I'm not breaking any rules." That was it. Robert exploded. "You don't live here? Then get out. I don't care what excuse you have. Leave right now or I'm reporting you." By now, people on balconies were watching. An older woman sitting under an umbrella put down her magazine and stared. "I'd rather not make a big scene," the woman said softly. "You already did." Robert spun around, muttering angrily as he stormed toward the office. But he only took 3 steps before her voice stopped him cold. "You might want to look at this first." Robert turned slowly. The woman had pulled out her phone and was tapping on an app. Then she turned the screen toward him. There, in bold letters, was her name. Helen Henshaw, property owner, Phoenix Gardens, LLC. Robert stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. Someone on a balcony whispered, "What's happening down there?" Another resident walking his dog nearby slowed down, sensing the tension. Robert tried to recover. "That doesn't mean you can just..." "Yes," Helen said gently, standing up now. "It does. I bought this whole complex 4 months ago. Quietly. I don't like making big announcements." Robert blinked hard. You own Phoenix Gardens?" She nodded. "All 150 apartments." The other residents watching were now looking at each other with wide eyes. Helen Henshaw never liked being the center of attention. For 12 years, she had been a professor of city planning at Arizona State University. Her work focused on helping struggling neighborhoods without pushing out the people who live there. 4 months earlier, she had bought Phoenix Gardens in a private deal. The place was old, but had character. Most apartments were filled with long-term residents. Working people, retirees, single parents, young couples. Helen didn't arrive with a clipboard or a team of workers. Just herself, her old pickup truck, and quiet visits at different times. She wanted to understand how the place worked. Who got up early, who walked dogs at night, who waved, who didn't. A week after buying the complex, She sat in the back of a Friday night board meeting without telling anyone who she was. She wanted to hear how people really talked about their lives when they didn't know the owner was listening. Several residents brought up problems. Slow repairs, stolen packages, a broken light near the laundry room. Everyone was polite but tired. She wrote down every word. She met Maria Santos, a single mom with 2 kids who worried her rent would go up. Helen didn't speak that night. She just listened, then quietly paid for all the repairs and told management to keep rent the same for 6 months. By the 2nd month, people started noticing small changes. Repairs happened faster. The trash area got cleaned up. New lights appeared without anyone asking. But they didn't know who was behind it. Helen kept showing up, sometimes just to sit and read, other times to walk around in the evening. She believed that owning a place meant taking responsibility, not staying away from it. That Wednesday, she had no plan to be noticed. She just wanted 30 minutes of peace by the water. But when Robert approached her, everything she'd tried to avoid, attention, confrontation, drama, landed right in her lap. Her mother once told her, "People don't always see what's in front of them, especially when it doesn't match what they expect." That voice stayed with her as Robert questioned her, accused her, threatened to call security. She could have yelled back, matched his anger, but she'd learned to pick her battles carefully. So when Robert threatened to call security, she didn't panic. She pulled out her phone and let the truth speak for itself. By the time Robert's voice had turned harsh, a dozen people were watching from balconies and windows. The tension was thick. Frank Rodriguez, 68, a retired mechanic, leaned over his 3rd-floor balcony. "Robert always sticks his nose where it don't belong," he muttered to his wife. But he picked the wrong person today. Carmen Williams, a 35-year-old teacher, had heard the whole thing from her lounge chair. She sat frozen, book forgotten in her lap. Helen stood up with the grace of someone who knew the moment had completely changed. Robert, though shaken, tried to recover. "Well, nobody told us anything. Management should have sent out a notice. How were we supposed to know?" She gave a small smile. "You weren't supposed to know, but that doesn't excuse assumptions." From the balcony, Frank chuckled. She got him good. Robert looked around, realizing the pool had become a stage. He tried to shift blame. "Look, if people had been informed, maybe this misunderstanding wouldn't have happened." Helen didn't move. Her voice stayed level. "You didn't ask. You assumed. There's a difference." That hit hard. Even people who might have supported Robert earlier were quiet now. Carmen stood up and walked over. "Are you okay?" she asked Helen. "I am," Helen replied. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." She nodded. "Thank you." Then the maintenance golf cart rolled into view. Behind the wheel was Tony Chun, the property's longest working employee. He smiled at Helen, clearly knowing who she was. "Everything good here?" Tony asked. Helen answered, "Yes, just a conversation." Robert looked away. Tony stayed in his cart, his presence adding final proof to Helen's words. Robert had lost the control he was used to having. His shoulders hunched as he shifted his keys from hand to hand. "I didn't mean any harm," he said finally. I'm protective of this place." Helen didn't interrupt. She let the words settle. "You've lived here a long time?" she asked. 16 years, he said. "I moved in right after my divorce, and I've always looked out for the rules." "I respect that," she said. "But protecting a community doesn't mean policing people who don't look familiar. It means being open enough to ask questions, not make accusations." From the balcony above, Frank called out, "Lady's got a point, Robert. Robert flinched, caught between feeling defensive and embarrassed. "Look," Helen said, addressing the small crowd. "I didn't come here today looking for drama. I was just trying to enjoy a quiet moment." Mike Torres, standing near the gate with his wife and baby, raised his hands. "You handled that better than most people would have," Carmen added. "If I were you, I'd be furious." "I've been angry before," Helen said, "but I've learned that anger burns out fast, and sometimes people remember your reaction more than their own actions." There was a moment of silence. No one argued with that. Robert shifted again. "Well, you could have said something sooner about owning the place." She met his eyes. "I didn't think I needed to." That hit harder than anything she'd said before. She didn't owe him an explanation, yet she'd given him one anyway, with dignity. Helen raised her hand slightly. "Let's not turn this into a show. I don't want people looking at him sideways next week. That's not what this is about. I just want folks to think twice before deciding who belongs and who doesn't." Lisa Torres, holding her baby, nodded slowly. "That's really fair." That night, word spread through Phoenix Gardens like wildfire. By the next morning, it had traveled to every building. Maria Santos was telling her neighbor what happened. He tried to throw her out like she was nobody, and it turns out she owns the whole place. Frank was still talking about it. She handled herself like someone raised right. Didn't yell back, didn't try to embarrass him. And in his apartment, Robert sat by his kitchen window, stirring coffee that had gone cold. His thoughts were stuck back at the pool, replaying her words. "You didn't ask. You assumed. There's a difference." He kept thinking about how calm she was. It bothered him because he realized he hadn't thought at all. He'd seen a woman sitting where he didn't expect her to be and jumped straight to judgment. The next morning, Helen returned to meet with Tony and the maintenance crew. People watched her differently now. Not with fear or suspicion, but with attention. Later that week, Carmen passed Helen near the mailboxes. "You know," she finally said, "my sister manages apartments in Tucson. She's been trying to keep them affordable. She could use someone to talk to." Helen paused. "I'd be happy to connect with her." Carmen smiled. "You might be the first landlord I've ever said that to." 5 days after the pool incident, Robert walked by while Helen was at the leasing office. He stopped, not expecting to see her. He hesitated, then walked over. "I wasn't raised to speak without thinking," he said. "But lately, I think I forgot that." Helen studied him. People forget all kinds of things. What matters is what they choose to remember next time. He nodded. "I won't forget this one." No handshake, no forced apology, just a pause that said everything. 2 months later, a new family moved into apartment 237. No one questioned them. No one cornered them or demanded explanations. Neighbors even dropped off welcome gifts. Helen noticed, not because she expected credit, but because it confirmed what she knew. When people are given the chance to grow, some of them take it. She sat at the pool again one evening. Across the courtyard, she saw Carmen waving to Robert. He gave a small wave back. Helen smiled. Frank came down and sat beside her with a loud grunt. "You know," Frank said, "this place feels different lately." "Different how?" Helen asked. "In a good way. People thinking before they talk. Not everyone, but enough." Helen closed her notebook. "Sometimes that's all it takes. People used to think quiet meant weak," Frank said. "But yours is the kind that makes people listen harder." That reminded her why she chose to do things differently. Her mother didn't raise her to win arguments. She raised her to build spaces where arguments didn't have to happen in the first place. Robert still walked the grounds in the afternoons, but now when he passed someone unfamiliar, he asked questions before making assumptions. Carmen started hosting book swaps. Frank offered to teach kids bike safety. Helen never asked for any of it. It just started happening. As the sun dropped low, Helen stood and walked back to her truck. Because sometimes the biggest statement a person can make is leaving things better than they found them, without ever needing to say a word about it.